We're going to talk about the Delphi case, Richard Allen, trials day 7 and 8. We got a special guest, Lauren from Hidden True Crime. We got another special guest, Jimmy, a nice Irish guy, Ganello. Right? Jimmy Ganello, retired NYPD forensics firearms examiner, is second to none. And I'm so happy to bring him to our audience and have him here for this case. And as the defense and the prosecution fight back and forth about the ballistics and the gun linked back to Richard Allen.
Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered more than 7 years ago. And today we learned how investigators tied the so-called magic bullet found near Abby and Libby's bodies to a gun found in Richard Allen's home.
Today, Scott, jurors heard testimony that the state says puts Richard Allen squarely at the crime scene.
The state's witness testified for 7 hours. That speaks to the importance of her.
She used to be a firearms examiner for the state of Indiana, for the state police. She was on the witness stand all day explaining how she tested a bullet cartridge that investigators found at the crime scene between Abby and Libby's bodies.
The specific cartridge found at the scene, which has been referred to in the past as the magic bullet. She showed 3 ways a cartridge could be ejected from that specific handgun.
The defense had some issues with what she was saying. They wanted a rebuttal. Tell me about their argument against the state witness.
So one of the defense's main argument was the fact that the round found at the crime scene was just cycled, meaning it was not fired, it was cycled, popped out of the weapon. But she compared it to a fired round. The experts saying that the markings that the weapon would make on a cartridge would be the same. A fired round would just be a little bit more distinct, but it would still do the same thing with it cycled versus fired. The defense also saying that there's a community that says ballistics is not a science, it's subjective. And you can't have a conclusive, definitive, 100% conclusive.
The defense attorney is saying that it's not 100% accurate or 100% conclusive. No forensic science discipline is 100% accurate or conclusive. All right, so let's just get that out of the way. Okay, fingerprints, not. DNA, nope. Okay, firearms tool mark, handwriting analysis, all of these other forensic disciplines, none of them are. That's just the nature of science. In life, you don't have 100%. And no one can testify to that, right? So we can't say that it's to the exclusion, like fingerprints. We can't say it's that person's fingerprint to the exclusion of everybody in the world, because everybody in the world hasn't been tested. Yeah. So we can't say those things. They used to say them. So let me back it up a little bit and give you a little history of what happened here. In 2009, the National Academy of Science put out a report on the state of forensic science, and it attacked certain disciplines. Bite marks from skin, for instance. You can't do that no more. You can't make comparisons of bite marks on skin anymore to denture, okay? Because of the elasticity of the skin and the ability for it to stretch and deform and so forth. So that has been discredited. Then they tried to go after tool marks, firearms tool marks. They went after handwriting analysis. They went after latent fingerprints. They went after all the impression evidence, footwear and tire. They tried to, and you have to understand who was on this panel too. There were a bunch of defense attorneys, okay? And they tried to discredit all of these disciplines. When I was the director of the science training program at the medical examiner's office, at that time, all the National Institute of Justice, Department of Justice grants were being put towards training. After the 2009 report came out about the National Academy of Science, from 2014 on, the training grants stopped. And all of the research and development training grants were then turned into research and development to solidify the forensic disciplines that came under attack in the National Academy of Science report. So ballistics, tool marks, footwear impression, tire impression, handwriting analysis, all of these things. They gave out grants to all these scientists around the country, and they did all these studies, and they shored up the science. So the defense attorney is using that aspect of that report to try to attack this, but that has already been disproven. It is an applied science. The National Institutes of Standards, NIST, already have validated ballistic tool mark examinations and it is an applied science.
There's no, as far as I know, there's no science that's 100% all the time. There's no absolutes in science. Science is only good up until they prove the science to be wrong, and then it's rethought. But ballistics has been around for over 100 years, argued in courtrooms for that whole 100+ years. So I've never seen two different guns make the same marks as each other. So, but I can't say that there isn't two out there because I didn't look at every gun that's out there. So, but in my opinion, it's a valid science. It works off of tool marks, which are random, and they're created by tools that change during the manufacturing process. Every firearm that's made will come in contact with a tool that has been changed from the one before it. And there are methods to determine even consecutively manufactured firearms or barrels and be able to determine which fire, which bullet, or which cartridge case.
Can you talk to the audience about what we're looking at here and what significance this has as it pertains to the evidence the state has presented and obviously the defense is trying to refute?
Okay, so that's a striated tool mark. There's two types of tool mark. One is when two pieces of metal strike each other. The harder metal will leave an impression on the softer metal. And the other one is a striated impression. So you have force and you have movement. And that'll create that striated mark. It's basically the highs and the lows on the tool mark that are being dragged across the metal and making those striated type of lines. So this is a live cartridge. It has 4 parts, which is the cartridge case itself, which is this long part, the bullet that sits on top, and on the bottom you have a primer.
Perfect. So
The primer to the middle. That's what ignites the propellant when you fire the round. And then you have propellant that's inside of this. So what happens is that round is usually placed in something called a magazine. A magazine, a round would be placed on top of it and locked into place. If you wanted to load this weapon, it's not a real weapon. You can see the red in the front. If you want to load this weapon, you would insert the magazine, right, and then pull back on the slide. What that does is it lets the first one that's in the magazine pop up and be ready to be pushed into that chamber of the weapon. So when that comes forward, it'll strip off that first round and force it up into the chamber of the weapon. Chamber of the weapon is the part that's the cartridge sits into before it's fired.
Okay.
Now the process that we're worried about in this case is that a live round that's placed into a firearm and not fired, you would have to manually extract and eject. I'm messing up with the camera. Extract and eject that round, right? So there's a force going back that you're applying. It allows these tools. One is the extractor, which is a sort of a hook-like device that catches on to that. This is another mock-up.
It's a bigger one.
Say that again?
I said it's a bigger one. That's a good.
A lot bigger. So that extractor would come in and lock up on that rim. The rim is this portion of the cartridge case, and it sits in the chamber with the extractor attached to it like that. As you pull back on the slide, it'll put force on the extractor to pull it out of the extractor, to pull it out of the chamber and come in contact with the ejector, which is a small pin type of device that flips the cartridge case out of the ejector port, which is this hole that's cut out in the side of the gun.
Right.
So now that round will be extracted, ejected, and if there's more rounds in there, when that slide goes forward again, it loads up another round. It does the same thing. When you fire it, it gets forced back by the, as Ed and I were talking about before, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so the energy that's pushing that bullet out of the barrel is actually pushing against the slide of the weapon and causing it to extract and eject.
I think the most confusing part for our listening audience is how are they taking this unfired round and putting it back to that gun that they did the search warrant on Mr. Allen's home? How is the experts in forensics being able to say that that particular round came out of that particular gun?
Thank you. And a lot of what you said was sort of what Melissa Oberg, the expert witness, said in court, but it was just, it's hard to hear we're further back to see you demonstrate that was already beyond helpful and clarified a lot in my mind. So what she said exactly, I have the exact quote here. I think it was the most profound quote from this day in court before defense. So before the cross and before the defense came on and confused us all. She stated, quote, I was able to identify item 314 as cycling item 16. So to explain, 314 is the gun that was seized from Richard Allen's home in 2022. And item 16 is the unspent cartridge, or I don't know how you say it, but the cartridge found the what?
Live cartridge.
Live cartridge found at the crime scene between the bodies of Libby and Abby. So she said, I was able to identify the gun found at Richard Allen's as cycling the cartridge, live cartridge. So she actually showed on the screen 3 ejection. Okay, so I have a really flimsy drawing that I made in court. It was a photograph. It was a microscope photograph.
Did you?
Yeah, I didn't graduate in art. We all know that. So this is my attempt.
Lauren, I'm putting you full screen.
So let's see if I can find it. That. Do we see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Those circles were where they were. That's what she showed us that was found at the crime scene. That's what it looked like.
Okay, but we have a little vocabulary issue here.
Okay.
So there are numerous types of tool marks that are found on ballistics. One of them is an extractor.
Okay.
And the another one is an ejector.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I do know they're 2 different things now. Okay. I'm listening.
The ejector will go along the rim of the cartridge case, right? The ejector will come off on a different angle to create that motion of it being forced out of the hole, right? So the extractor is always in the same spot, and so is the ejector.
Okay.
So just by your drawing, it's probably a combination of extraction marks and ejection marks, which we call cumulatively as cycling marks.
Right. The expert talked about cycling, and that's what
Yes.
Jimmy did before. When he sticks a loaded magazine in there with that slide locked back, he then sticks the magazine up there. Now that bullet is able to rise above into the well of the chamber. And then when he releases the slide will come forward, ripping the bullet out of the magazine. The extractor will come over the rim of the cartridge at the head stamp and make a tool mark as it comes across it, and then lock in place. It's a hook. So you're not seeing my finger, but it's just a hook. Okay, that locks in. It's a hook that locks in front of the head stamp, but before the main body of the cartridge. When someone takes that and then pulls the slide back, now that gun is what's called in battery. There is a live cartridge in chamber. When somebody takes the slide and pulls that back, that live cartridge, the extractor will pull the cartridge out of the chamber, and then the ejector will then scratch along the side and kick it out of the ejection port. So that is cycling that live cartridge out, leaving those tool marks on that cartridge.